This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment coach for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now here is today's episode. Episode 132. Do you have a loud inner critic? You know, that voice inside your head that is nonstop and beats you up because you mess up or things aren't perfect or tells you not to assert yourself and ask for what you need? I know many highly sensitive professional women struggle with this, but if you head over to today's show notes, you can download your own guide in turning your inner critic into your inner guide in 4 steps. Now, here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about my guest today. Today I have on Jane Stafford, and she has been sitting behind a loom since 1978. In the early years, Jane was a production weaver and sought-after workshop instructor, introducing countless weavers to the possibilities of color and design in cloth, while at the same time consulting closely in the design of the Louette Jane loom. There is a reason Louette's table loom is named Jane. And helping thousands of weavers learn to use Louette looms on instructional DVDs. And I have to say, that's one space that I met Jane, is through her DVD and instructing on Louette looms. For many years, Jane taught exclusively in her studio on beautiful Salt Spring Island, British Columbia. Weavers came from all over the continent to attend JST's famous weaving retreats, which contributed to Jane's being named Teacher of the Year by Handwoven Magazine in 2014. In 2016, Jane created the JST Online Guild, a streamable weaving resource viewed by thousands of weavers around the world. The Online Guild is a resource that allows anyone, anywhere, access to Jane's workshop from the comfort of their own home. And ladies, I just want to say before I really, say, yay, Jane, you're here, I want to give you just a little brief background on this interview today. So I've been following Jane for the past few years now. It's because I actually bought a used Louette loom. And I know this kind of interview is not a typical one for Jane because I'm not doing a specific fiber arts or weaving podcast, but I hope she would be on today because she inspires me. She's fun and playful as an online teacher who encourages new weavers and those who have been weaving for years to try new weave structures, create their own designs. Plus, she gives back by supporting weavers from all different kinds of parts of the globe. So, Jane, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, Nicole. It's very nice. Thank you for asking me.
Well, before we really get into this too much with all these questions I have for you, would you mind sharing just a little bit with my listeners, like what got you into being a weaver?
I have always been a maker since I was a little girl. Growing up in the 50s and 60s, those were just things that I was taught. We were all taught, I think, to sew and knit and create things, make useful things. And so I was a sewer. I learned to sew at a very early age, and I made all my own clothes. And I loved sewing. And therefore I fell in love with fabric. I loved fabric. I loved hanging clothes on the line. I loved touching fabric. Anything to do with clothes, I loved it. Anyway, fast forward to 1978. I think I was 21, and I was visiting a friend of my mother's and waiting for my mom to come out of a meeting and nosing around this lady's house, and rounded the corner to her dining room and saw this huge thing. And on this huge thing was a bunch of thread on one side and a bunch of cloth on the other. And it's the first time I had ever seen a loom. Anyway, I was just mesmerized and thought, oh my God, this woman is making her own cloth. I could do that. I could learn that. So a few weeks later, I got in touch with a lady through the Weavers Guild in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And Jan Corderwood took me into her little studio in her outside her house and got me going. That was it. Once I had a shuttle in my hand, there was just no other options for me in life. And I thought I was making the most beautiful cloth on the planet. I still remember the first weaving I did. It was so bad, but you couldn't have told me that then.
Well, and I think that's so great because even in your teaching that you do now on your guild, because I have not ever been able to attend, or I did not attend one of your live workshops, but you come through on your online guild of how you still love it. I mean, that joy creating cloth, sewing, all of that hasn't gone away according to the videos and how you teach it. So is that still true for you?
Absolutely. I am smitten. I will be smitten until the end.
Love it. I love it.
I don't know what else I would do.
Well, I know in your online guild, you do such a beautiful job, and this is part of why I really wanted you on today. You continuously, through every one, I think it's almost every one of your videos through a season, that you encourage us as students to play, to really embrace the unknown. Like you give us some instructions like, okay, we're going to do this weave structure, but you really like put on extra thread so that you can play. It's as if I keep hearing you say, face the fear of how you're going to quote, mess it up. Because my perfectionism likes to come out and like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And you're like, no, just play. Get in there, see what happens. And you really help, I guess, encourage and, keep us curious of what we can do or how we can really expand upon the concepts you're teaching. So I'm curious for you, did this facing these fears or facing the unknown, did that come from somebody? Has that always been innate in you? And how has it helped you with business and life in general? Because there is this playfulness about it.
I don't think I've always been playful with my weaving, to be honest. It's something that I have developed over the years. You know, when I started, I made every mistake there was to make. I've made every single possible mistake, and I've felt defeated at times. And once I made the decision that I was going to try and make a living doing this, then I had to deal with things when they went wrong and use common sense to find my way out of the problem. And through repetitive weaving, because I was making a living as a production weaver in the early years, through repetitive weaving, I started to see that I was developing a system that I didn't intentionally try to develop. But after a few years of weaving, I realized that I was developing a style that I was comfortable with. And through that repetition, my teaching or my aesthetic, my skill, my technique at the loom was improving all the time. And then when it came time to teach other people, because I needed to increase my income, and I love sharing knowledge, and I am a very enthusiastic person about whatever I'm sharing knowledge about. I get right into it. I realized that some of those things from doing repetitive work were really helpful. And so I started to build that into my teaching. It really hasn't been a long, long time that I've been able to just say, let her rip, which I encourage all the time in the videos. As a production weaver, you don't have time to do that all the time. And I feel that I've reached a point in my life where I feel so grateful for being able to do what I do now, because I've learned to play more. And if I had been given permission possibly to play at an earlier age, I think I would have gotten further faster. But because when you're a production weaver, well, you can't always take the time to be playful.
Yeah.
Everything has evolved. It's taken me 40 years to get where I've gotten. And it's been a very organic path, a very organic journey.
Well, and I think that's for most of my listeners, that's so much of what I talk about, or a lot of my guests even share. If we stay in this place of continuous learning, which I will forever be a student in many, many subjects, and fiber arts is definitely one of them. That's how we will evolve. And I think it is so much, especially for women, it's knowing it's okay to be playful. But I get where you're coming from. Like as a production weaver, it's like, no, that there wasn't like a luxury really to do that. But if you didn't even know there was a possibility, right? We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Then it's hard to even say, well, I didn't even know that was even a thing, or I could. But as we grow and as everything continues to change in our world, it's being able to say, oh, but I can set a little bit of time over here and just get really curious. And I know, again, within your online guild, you have shared with us as the students that you've taken, some specific types of yarn and there was a certain structure and you're like, and it was done at this set and it was like cardboard. You could stand it up against the wall. Still remember, I don't remember which season that's in, but it made me laugh. I'm like, oh, I've created one of those.
Yeah, we all have.
Yeah. And then you're just like, and I got curious and I started to open that up. And that's it. It's really allowing ourselves to be curious with wherever we are in our life, whether there's things going on in relationships or our business. It's getting curious, like what's working, what's not. And also coming, like you're saying, to being grateful for where we are, because otherwise we can get really stuck in that fear of like, oh, I can't do anything different. And it really can shut us down.
Yeah. I also had the great privilege when I was a young weaver to go to a great school, so I shouldn't be saying that I developed this all on my own. I didn't. I've had a pretty skookum education, and I'm very grateful for having that. That thing that you just spoke about, the issue you just spoke about making cloth that stood in a corner, to be playful with set. That was something I learned from one of my instructors at school. And it was a workshop called The Consummate Cloth. And it was all about creating fabrics that had exquisite hand, exquisite drape. And basically the instructor put a cone of yarn on the table and said, I'll come back at the end of the day, set it where you think it should be set, then open it up, then close it up, tighten it up, weave all these samples. And everybody in the workshop had a different cone of yarn. And it was just such an eye-opener for me. So to be playful, that there wasn't a right and a wrong. Yes. And that's the one thing I truly believe in everything that we do. Yes. There's easier ways and harder ways. There's things that work for some people's hand dexterity and not for other people's hand dexterity. So I think I learned the skills at school to evaluate what I was doing. And if I didn't like it, I knew I could make it better. So I was always striving to make it better.
I love that.
And through that, you learn that, oh my gosh, with this one yarn, I can make all these different things. It doesn't have to be this way. It could be this way here. And if you want to make something else, it could be that way there. But that's life, really. You see that I see that in the way you grow your garden. I see it in the way we cook. I see it in the way I raise my children. Well, that worked with this kid, but it sure doesn't work with that kid. You can't just have these rigid ways of walking through life because it won't always serve you.
Right. And you've even said I think it was through some of your newsletters and also on the Guild itself, talking about now that you've been traveling the world in different ways, but some recent trips to India, how here in North America, it's like, oh, you can only use cotton together, or maybe it's cotton and silk, but you're like, oh no, they use cotton plus this. And it's something that really kind of, again, continue to open up your eyes of, oh, we can do these things even more differently because they've been doing it for hundreds of years. Yeah.
Well, as soon as you start looking at other cultures and where the weaving culture is still very much alive, like in India, there's, 8 million weavers still working in India, possibly more. Don't quote me on that, but there's a lot of weavers in India. and working on hand looms. And my first trip to India was in 2011. And it really did profoundly change everything about how I looked at cloth. Once again, I've had so many little moments in my life where I've stopped and went, oh my gosh, that was a belief system I had. It's not necessarily the truth, and then all of a sudden you look at how other people do things and go, So India was a huge, a huge shift for me.
Oh,
and
love that.
Yeah, it's been really a lot of fun bringing those ideas back here and sharing them.
Well, yeah.
The fabrics are just unreal. Oh.
Well, and again, we don't know what we don't know. And then when we go and we see it from different cultures, and like you're saying, they've just got, oh my gosh, such depth and experience in this area, and go, oh, that's what I could do. It's like something maybe small or combining of two different types of yarns. And you're just like, it just opens up these, so many different opportunities and ways of thinking that it's like, well, that just threw that belief system right out the door. Next.
Yeah.
Love.
It's cool. I feel so blessed to have been able to have some of these trips, and because it really does change your life.
Yeah. I mean, I know Mark Twain, he's known for this quote about travel. He says it's fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. But when Mark Twain said that, it was just like, you're not the same when you travel. You just, if you're open to learning and seeing different and new, you can't come back the same.
That's right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Is part of your travel then where you really started to advocate, educate, and promote, support other weavers of the world? Like, how did you get involved? There's a couple different groups that you really support. How did you get involved in doing that?
I have worked with two organizations, Maiwa Handprints in Vancouver, and they have the Maiwa Foundation. That business is owned by Charlotte Kwan, and Charlotte invited me to teach at her textile symposium, 10, 12 years ago. And I was so honored to be included in her symposium as a teacher. Prior to that time, I have never really gone out in the world too much. I'm not, I love to stay home. I love to have my feet firmly planted on my little farm. And so travel is not something that comes easily to me. I did travel early on to teach workshops, but only because I needed income, So I was so surprised that Charlotte Kwan even knew about me. And anyway, I just jumped at the chance to go and teach, and I got the opportunity to meet her. And then a year later, she asked me if I would go to India with her as a weaving facilitator for a workshop that the Maiwa Foundation was putting on for 27 generational artisans in India. I was so scared. It took me about 6 months to make the decision to go. She kept saying, Jane, have you made your decision? And I was like, oh, I'm so scared to leave Salt Spring. This is a big trip.
Yeah. It's not like it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. It's a long hop.
Yeah. And I don't do very well in hot weather. So I was worried that I would get sick and bring everybody down. And anyway, I got there and I just fell in love with India. And fell in love with the artisans. And Charlotte has been working in India for 30, 40 years, possibly. Yeah, probably 40 years.
Wow. And
she works deeply preserving textile traditions and village life. I can't tell you how many groups of artisans that she works with, but she goes in, she sees their incredible skill, everything that she really is about is preserving tradition, preserving natural dye, most importantly, preserving handloom weaving. Anyway, her connection is deep.
Yeah.
And I got to travel with her to places that you would never actually get to go. And oh my God, Jane, it again was another huge point in my life where everything shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back several other times with her to assist her on tours, and started to fall in love with certain villages that I had the privilege of going back to again and again. And then when you realize that there are things that we have that we take for granted, little things that could make someone else's life so much easier in another place, it just is a no-brainer. You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
You do whatever you need to do to try and find a way to help. So, the first thing I did was help one village, teach them some new designs. And I realized the first time I was there that they had their big production looms, and I understood this so well. You've got your production looms. You can't take the time or the equipment out of production to play around and experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do we have in the West that I could give to them that would allow them to do that? And that's a table loom. So the next time I went back, I took a table loom, and I gathered all kinds of little mini rug samples of things that they might not have seen before, and ideas. And I had a little mini workshop in Jawaja, and it was so well received. And one of the great things that happened from that is when the rug weavers of Jawaja went to Delhi to a big craft show that they were going, they were able to take that little table loom with them and demonstrate at the craft fair. And for the buying public, it was so good for them to see what goes into making a carpet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The village of Jawaja is quite rural in Rajasthan, and so it's educating.
Yeah.
They were educating their customers.
Yep.
It's awesome. So it was a real win-win.
Yeah.
And so I just fell in love with those weavers.
Oh.
Mind you, I tend to fall in love with weavers wherever I go.
They're a hard group not to fall in love with.
They are a really hard group. So the other organization that I work with is Sabahar, and that's in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And it was through Charlotte Kwan in Maiwa, and through that very first trip with Charlotte in 2011 that I met Kathy Marshall. And Kathy Marshall is a Canadian as well, from northern Alberta, and she has worked in Africa for her entire adult life.
Oh, wow.
She loves textiles and started a business trying to preserve airy silk production, or bring airy silk production to Ethiopia, and started with 2 spinners in her kitchen and slowly grew her business. And now she employs hundreds and hundreds of weavers and spinners and dyers. And she invited me to go there, I think, for the first time in 2015. And again, it was I was petrified. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's even hotter there. But it turned out it wasn't. So I took my son with me, actually. She was so kind, and I was afraid to go and on another big trip. And so she let me bring Evan to look after his mom.
Yeah.
And we had a great time. It was just such a wonderful trip. We were there for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And again, I went in to help assist the weavers and improve their technique, teach them weave structures that they had never heard of, help them develop products, teach them a little bit about color and design, because their weaving is different. It's not coming from a traditional aesthetic as it is in India. Every village in India has its own style. It's the things that have been developed over centuries and centuries. Sabahar was creating textiles for a contemporary market. And so they have different concerns. Anyway, again, I just cannot believe what they accomplish with what they have.
Yeah.
It's truly humbling.
Yeah.
Truly humbling. Going to India and going to Ethiopia, it's like I came back feeling like I was a total fraud.
Mm-hmm.
I have fancy looms.
Yep. Yep.
They weave with the simplest of equipment and create the most remarkable textiles, and it's because they have such extraordinary skill.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, but it's all of this, you taking the leap to go and teaching them, but them teaching you. So I like to say that beautiful full circle, being open to learning and bringing that gift back and helping us know more about them and supporting them, because this is a industry that, as you're saying, in the other countries, it's alive and well. And here it's more of it's kind of like, oh, it's a nice hobby kind of thing. Yeah. But it's like, it's such a skill and craft that it's like, you can't go away. You just can't,
right. It needs to be preserved.
Yes, that's the word.
And it is necessary. Yes. That's not like if you were born into a weaver's caste in Ethiopia or in India, it's not going to be easy for you to change your occupation if you so wish to. So they need to feel proud of what they create and feel that their textiles are special and what they're doing, they are special.
Yes.
And they are special. They are.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we try to help in any way we can. With Jawaja or the Mewa Foundation, COVID has been particularly hard in India on the artisans.
Yeah.
Because their tourism has dried up. And so Maiwa has had to work extremely hard to get all of their products online because their stores have been closed down for many, many times.
Yeah.
Or there's just not the commerce on the street that there used to be.
Right.
And so many of these villages rely on Maiwa placing orders. And so anyway, one way that we could help, that my business could help, was to publish patterns and put them online and ask people to pay what they could afford to pay. Because I understand that a lot of people are suffering and having a hard time in North America as well. So if you could pay, you had to pay $1.
Yeah.
That's the minimum amount you can pay. But if you can only pay $1, you could have this pattern for $1. If you felt that you were able to pay more for it, then that was great. Well, after I think we ran the initial fundraiser for maybe 2 months, and I did an online Facebook live weaving event. It was pretty funny. Anyway, I wove a towel every day for this little group of weavers that tuned in at 1:00. And that got everybody excited and enthused. And anyway, in the end, we were able to send $25,000 to the Maiwa Foundation.
Beautiful.
Which is really, really helping the village of Jawaja in particular.
Oh, that's huge.
Anyway, and another thing we were able to do for the weavers in Sabahar was I did a heddle fundraising drive 2 years ago when I came back from Ethiopia after my second trip, because I went back again. One of the things that I realized that they needed were professional heddles for their looms. They don't have a heddle eye. Now, this doesn't make any sense for people who aren't weavers listening to this. Sorry. But anyway, buying professional heddles, European heddles, are extremely expensive. And so, heck, if a whole bunch of weavers here could all buy a couple of heddles, $5 or $10 worth of heddles, and we can get a whole bunch of people in on the heddle drive, we were able to buy them 100,000 heddles. It was awesome.
Wow. 100,000.
I know. And that just changed their life.
Yeah.
So they told me what they needed and I got it for them.
Yeah.
So I have gained so much from my trips away that you just have to find a way to give back.
Yeah. Well, it's the giving back, it's the collaboration, and like you said earlier on, it's like, oh, I can see this thing I take for granted because it's easy for me to access or buy or whatever would be life-changing for them. And so again, that learning from them and saying, I could do this, and then making it work. And it's all through that collaboration and giving back. So that's beautiful.
I definitely feel that I did not teach anybody in India how to do anything at a loom. I have only learned from them. Really. That's kind of hilarious.
It's all good though. All good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pivot really quick, and I want to ask, because you started this online guild, what'd you say, back in 2016, and I have to say, Jane, one thing I really admire about you is you really embrace this technology. And I know for so many fiber artists, creatives, it's like technology or being in front of the camera has really scared people. And I'm thinking, man, Jane is like, she's on this innovator because she's like on the front of the curve. That's what they call innovators, right? And it's like you were way ahead of the game. And then COVID hit, years later, and you're like, yep. And I'm not worried about necessarily losing business because it's already online. I can still reach people. So how or what sort of challenges did you face when you were stepping into this world of everything online? And you've got like beautiful people who come in and have done the camera work and all these different angles because you get up close with the work that you're doing. What sort of challenges did you have to face before you got that little beauty up and going?
Doing the filming has never been hard for me because the first videos I ever made were the videos that I made for Louette. Actually, even before I made the videos for Louette, I had years and years ago when I first started to sell looms, every time I sold a loom, the person who purchased the loom got to come to the studio. I taught them all about the loom, helped them put their very first warp on, and gave them really good service. And then the first time I sold a loom to someone who was from away, like, my gosh, someone phoned from the interior of BC and wants a loom, but I can't teach her. So what could I do? So my girlfriend, Cheryl, who's actually our dyer for our business, she does all our hand dyeing. She was the only person back in the day who had a video camera.
Oh, wow.
When you had a little wee cassette, tiny, dinky little wee cassette that fit in there. So we borrowed her video cassette recorder, and my assistant at the time, Susan, we made a video for Judy. I still remember her name. Hey, Judy, sorry you can't be here, but I really want you to know this about your loom. Anyway, she loved that video and started to tell other people about the video, and I started to sell looms. And so we made copies of that video. So that went way back, and it came about simply because I wanted to give the best possible customer service to this person as I could. Well, then I told Louette about it, and Louette then said, wow, would you make a professional set for us? So I did. And I found it quite easy because when I'm looking at a camera, I pretend I'm talking to the person.
Yes.
And again, when I'm talking weaving, when I'm talking anything to do with weaving, like my enthusiasm just comes out. I don't even have to work hard to make that happen. So when I wanted to create the online guild, that was something that evolved. I could teach workshops online, blah, 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 blah. We had a great website at that point. And so the next steps was to start teaching workshops online, but I didn't really want to have to do an individual workshop where you had to sell it over and over and over again. That just seemed like way too much work. And I don't have any business background. So I always choose the simplest, easiest way for me to get from A to B. And for me, the guild idea was the simplest way. Okay, they pay their dues. I'll give them a video every single 5 weeks. I can figure that out. And so then we started. But again, we had no idea where this was going to go. I had no idea it would grow to what it has grown to. And we've had to, we're always trying to catch up with technology to make it better, hold it better. We need a bigger vessel to hold everything. We're up to over 50 videos now, 50 times 3 1-hour videos or 3-hour videos. So it's getting quite massive, along with all the PDFs
Mm-hmm.
and closed captioning and blah, blah, blah. So you said I embrace it.
Uh-huh.
I embrace the idea, but I'm absolutely useless with all of it. And I happen to have the most amazing staff. The people that are on my team are the people that make all of this happen. I just have the ideas.
But I think that's where it starts there though, right? The idea
Mm-hmm.
starts and you're not closed off to asking for help. It is like we all have our kind of weak spots, right? And it's not even
Mm-hmm.
weak, like you can't do it. It's just like I don't really want to. It's not in my wheelhouse. And I know somebody over here who is really good at that. And I know in some of
Right.
my past episodes, we've talked about, getting VAs or hiring out. But this is what you're talking about. You're like, well, I've got a skilled team. And we all
Mm-hmm.
make this a well-oiled machine in working.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I as soon as I was able to add people to help me, I did it,
Yeah.
because I have never found technology easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm nervous of it, to
Mm-hmm.
be quite honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It scares
Yep.
me. I always think if I press that button, it's going to disappear, and it has many times.
Yep.
Anyway, but then they say, oh, it's still there. It's somewhere.
Yep.
So I just found it easier. I've got enough to deal with. I want to create content. I've always just wanted to create weaving.
Mm-hmm.
I've only just wanted to teach weaving.
Yep.
So I'm able to do that with the help of others. And as soon as we moved into this, the last few years, we've grown so much, and e-commerce has grown so much.
Mm-hmm.
I remember 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago, I was teaching in Vancouver, and Sandra, who's one of the moderators on the forum and on Ravelry for us, she said, have you ever thought of going into e-commerce? And it was like, Sandra, why would anyone want to buy yarn online? Like who would do that? Like, who would ever buy yarn online? Who would buy anything online? So I'm not ahead of the curve. I just have been blessed to have amazing people around me, suggesting ideas, giving me ideas. And sometimes I'm scared of those ideas when I first hear them,
Mm-hmm.
but then I let them percolate.
Yes.
I don't process information that quickly. And I
Yep.
know that about myself. And I think the people that work with me know that about me now too. Like at first I might sound like, no way, we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I go home and think about it for a day or two and go, oh, they kind of have a really good point.
Well, and it's funny though. A lot of my listeners are highly sensitives, and with highly sensitives, they're deep processors. So you're not like you're gonna spur of the moment. Oftentimes, make these decisions. It is letting things percolate and go. Okay, and how could I make that work? And oh yeah, that sounds good. And oh yeah, if so and so knows how to do that, we could absolutely do that. And then it's like, okay, yes.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is a process for me.
Yeah.
And generally it starts out with no.
Right.
No way. Are you nuts? Why would we do that? And then slowly it seeps in.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. I love it. Well, no matter whether you're the innovator or you have people that kind of put that in your ear, you percolate it and you work with them and making it happen, because it really is you seem to be ahead of the game for so many other weavers as well, instructors, and I've been taught by so many that are just incredible with their skills as well, but they're now trying to get online because they're used to doing everything in person, and it's trying to stay with the curve of where things are going. So yeah.
I also, I know that we are 5 years into this, and we're so lucky that we did this. And it all started simply because I wanted to be able to reach more people than I could teach in-house. I could only, we had 10 weavers come every 3 weeks for 1 week.
Wow.
So, but that wasn't sustainable anymore.
Right.
We did it for 10 years and it was exhausting. And so this method of teaching for me, it has given me a huge freedom.
Yeah.
And I think it's in many ways better for the students because, as a teacher, having spent all the years that I did teaching in person, they were intense workshops and you would get these gals in here and occasionally we get a fella, not too many, but you could see by 10:30 in the morning when I'm standing up there going blah, 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 that their eyes were starting to glaze over and it was like, there's just so much you can take in at a workshop. And then you got to weave all afternoon and get everything done and not hold anybody up. There's just so much stress involved in it. And they didn't get to videotape me and watch it all over again so that they might, oh yeah, that was when she was nodding off. I can see her head nodding off. She's trying to stay awake. I don't think she's going to remember that. Well, now if you nod off while I'm on TV, you can rewind it. It's great.
And it is true when you go to the in-person workshops, you're like, wow, that's a lot. And it's like, oh, I'm behind. It's like, no, you're not behind. You're just still trying to process and put it into action and do all this stuff. And so, yes, the online guild is so helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really love it. And for me as a teacher, it's allowed me to take every subject and go deeper.
Yes.
For some people, I don't think they appreciate going deeper, but my intent by going deeper or going over every single little detail comes from the experience of teaching for so long, knowing that not everybody watching is at the same place, but it's important that we travel together as a group. And so I have to bring everybody up to speed so that we can travel together.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We're all on this road together. And so, with technology, it's great. If I'm boring some people or they don't want to watch me weave, they can fast forward through it all. You can put me on high speed. My kids would have loved to have learned from me this way. They could have muted their mother. Put mom on mute.
I giggled. I think that was in one of your most recent videos that you had shot. And I was like, oh, I'm watching what she's doing this time. But you're like, and you can put me on high speed. I'm like, oh, that's right. You can. But I really wanted to see the method you were doing. So I played you at regular speed.
Oh, good. Well, there's some times when you can and sometimes when you don't. It's with the click of a button, you can make those changes. It's super cool.
It is. It absolutely
And you don't have to watch all the parts. And if you hate watching me weave, you don't have to watch me weave, but at least you get the lecture. So it's all there. You can take what you want and leave what you don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you also had this vision of like, I want to be able to reach more people. And I think that is the beautiful thing of online that we really can't, like even podcasting, right? I reach around the globe where I couldn't do it if I just talked locally. I couldn't do it if I was up on a podium somewhere talking. I can reach women that are all over the place. And if they choose to listen, they can. They don't have to. But it's like, here's an option. And they get things off of these podcasts that they may not even have where they live. So, yeah, that's part of why we do what we do.
We are so lucky to have all of these things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, all of this technology.
Before I totally wrap up and give the ladies who are listening all your links and all that good jazz, share with us who currently inspires you or who has inspired you over your years.
Oh my God, I have been inspired by so many people. I would say that I've had great inspiration from my teachers. I've had some just amazing teachers in my life in my early years. And my students have inspired me. My students have taught me so much. Yeah, I would say that my teachers and my students, as far as inspiring my teaching life, my weaving life, they have been my greatest inspiration.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. You can have a million teachers in your life, and some will work for you and some won't. And some teachers will give you little bits that work for you. Take what you can from everyone and don't feel bad if it doesn't all work for you.
Yeah.
It's important to know that not everybody's way, everybody teaches differently. Take what you can, take what works for you, take what works for you. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, just so if you want to find out more about Jane, her work, where you can actually buy yarn online and where you can also join her online guild, you can go out to janestafford.com textiles.com. And again, I will have that link on the show notes. She's also on Instagram, so you can see some of the beautiful work that's there. YouTube, she's in Ravelry. For some of you who are knitters, crocheters, and all that, you already know what Ravelry is. And then she's on Facebook. And I will, again, have all those social media links within the show notes so that you can get in touch with her that way and see what she does. And even also the organizations that she supports is on her website as well. So all of that information is there. And Jane, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this today and facing the nervousness of just like, oh my gosh, this woman does not have a weaving podcast. What does she want? I just so appreciate you doing this podcast with me today.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for inviting me. And I'm so glad you're enjoying the online guild.
Thank you for listening. And remember, if you have a loud inner critic, one that tells you you're not enough or you can't do something, head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com and download your Turn Your Inner Critic into Your Inner Guide in 4 steps.